Support for the Living Wisdom podcast is provided by InTouch Pharmaceuticals, a long-term care pharmacy committed to meeting the specialized pharmaceutical needs of their clients. Visit intouchpharma.com. Hey there, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Karsten alongside Deb Carriveau. And you know what? We recently got to meet a lot of people who are dealing with a family member with dementia and going through that journey. And I'm so grateful that we did, because it really puts what we're doing in perspective, right? Any days where you think, I'm tired, or I got things to do, no, we got to sit down, you realize how important this is and how it's really impacting somebody. And then also, it was so nice to hear so many people say that they watch this. You know, that just really motivates you, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
So it's just, we're so grateful for that, and keep it coming. And as I said to those of you who did come up to us, let us know if there's a topic that you want to talk about. So many people came up and had some questions for you, and those are perfect examples of things that we can talk about here in these segments. So please send us a message, contact Deb right below. We're always monitoring these, but I just want to tell you, letting us know that this is helping you just continues to light my fire.
Absolutely. And it really is, you know, the whole mission of why we do this is so that it's impactful and helpful for people who are walking this journey every hour of every day. So it really needs to be what they need it to be.
Absolutely.
And so, any feedback we get is just critically important to us.
It's so for you. You know, this is actually so perfect what we're about to talk about. We're talking about communicating with family members after a dementia diagnosis, because as we've talked about, so often it falls on one family member.
Right.
And when we met with a lot of people who were walking through this, a mom and son duo is sticking in my mind right now with this. And what that son said, and he said, Mom, no offense to you, but a lot of this goes on me. And this is why I think this conversation is so perfect, because it doesn't take one person. It's so emotionally draining, and there's just so much developing, and there's so much you need to know, and just all that comes in. This is not a one-person process.
No, it's not. And there are, this series that we're doing now is really all about those things that, as a caregiver are so critical for your survival and to be able to meet all the multitude of needs of your loved one. And, people hear us say it all the time, this is not a journey to be traveled alone.
No.
But so many times as a caregiver, you feel like you're trapped in a position where there is no one else. And so really this is about helping people try to figure out, how do you change that? And I hate conflict, so I get you, right? So we're just going to dive in. As you mentioned, this is going to be 3 parts. So let's just start off with, why is it important to have these conversations with family members? So, one of the things that all of us need to understand as caregivers is that, communicating your needs, communicating the needs of your loved one is probably the most important tool you have going forward. And so you really have to learn to kind of be goal-oriented, to be clear about the message that you're putting out there to other people. We really want, when you and I are having effective communication, that means not only am I being heard, but it also means that you're listening to what it is I'm saying and processing that. And so it really is important that we get those messages out to people. But so many times, being a caregiver is such an emotionally charged kind of situation that we tend to sometimes to say things in ways that are critical of other people who we don't feel like are on board, or we might make hurtful comments to each other, or vice versa. Other people might be making hurtful or critical comments to you as a caregiver. So it really is about trying to figure out, how do we clearly express ourselves without creating situations where there's a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of misunderstandings. Everything about this journey on both sides is such an emotionally charged situation it's really difficult to be able to navigate your way through that without some assistance.
It's funny because the first thing that's coming to my mind is when my husband and I get into arguments, I feel like it's always about money, right? Yeah. It's always about money. And then after we have the fight, we're like, we got to talk to each other and say, are you ready for this conversation? Of course, we never do that. We just keep getting into the fight.
Jump in, yeah.
But, what are your thoughts on that? Is it, hey, are we ready to have this conversation, or can we both, versus just like springing it on somebody?
So yes, sometimes what I tell people is, plan your conversations before you have them. Sit down and think it through. You need to make sure that you yourself are ready for this conversation and that you're prepared for whatever might be said in that process. And so, what we're going to talk about, as we move through this today is really, how do you make that happen? How do you change the climate of those conversations and make it, usable and helpful and doable? Those kinds of things.
I heard a couple things, and tell me if I'm wrong, and maybe you don't know because this is kind of random, which is not shocking for me. I heard one, have these conversations after you eat, because we're always so happy after we eat, or like when you're on a walk, when you're moving. Sometimes that, I don't know if that's true. I don't know where I heard it either.
So I don't know that necessarily.
I get really happy eating, so maybe
helpful.
That's just our.
And if maybe
it was in couples therapy that I learned that.
If your family, if one of the things that's really important to your family is gathering around the kitchen table and having a great meal together, and that puts everybody in a good mood, then by all means do it, use it.
Or invest in a spirit stick, like I talk.
Yeah, it's
if
my
you don't
turn,
have the
right.
stick, you don't
That's
talk.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so let's talk about how we change the climate so that we are heard, because again, that's kind of tricky.
Yeah. So part of what happens is, because caregiving is such an emotionally charged kind of situation, we tend to wait until we're in a moment of crisis. And then when things are really emotionally charged, that's when we pick up the phone and call somebody and go, listen, sister, I'm tired of doing this by myself.
Yes.
And things tend to be very hurtful, accusatory. We try to lay guilt on other people, thinking that doing that is going to make them respond to us and kind of give us help or support that we need. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to cause the opposite response. So first of all, the thing you need to learn is, when we're in those emotionally charged situations and we're trying to make ourselves heard, we're doing oftentimes that communication from a centeredness about us, okay, and how we're feeling about that other person. So in doing that and trying to communicate our message, I have a tendency to do that in what we call you statements.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't care about mom. You don't care that I'm doing this. You have no idea how hard this is. I can't believe I do all this, and now you want me also to make meals and take them to mom twice a week. You think your family's the only one that's important. Wow. My kids don't count. So you see how it can get into that. And so when I go into this conversation or try to communicate to another person, who in reality I'm just trying to elicit help and support and have you understand what it is I'm experiencing. But when we do it from that emotionally charged center and we're using those you kind of things, what's your response to that?
I'm just like, oh my, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah, exactly.
How dare you? I do care about mom.
Exactly. How dare you, think I don't care.
Like, that's mean. Yeah.
And so automatically, when we use those kinds of you statements, people's defensiveness goes up. So there's walls now all around you.
And I'm not even listening to you.
Exactly. You've already tuned me out, or you are so defensive now, you're sending back all those you kind of things.
Yeah.
And so what happens ultimately is we hit this wall with each other and nothing ever gets resolved. Okay? So what I encourage caregivers to do is, number one, sit down and take a look at what is it that you're trying to say. What message is it that you want that other person to hear? Once you've been able to identify that, then let's talk about how do I change that climate from this, guilt-laying, accusatory, you kind of statement to this being about me, okay, and how I'm feeling and what my situation is, and take ownership of what I'm experiencing. What I feel is not brought on by you, okay? This is a choice in terms of taking ownership of how I feel. So instead of those you kind of accusatory, emotionally charged things, let's say what my message is that I'm trying to communicate to you is that I need some help here. I'm carrying a big burden and I can't handle all of that.
Yeah.
So instead what I might say is, Christine, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I really want to be able to spend some time with my kids a couple times a week so I can go to their soccer games.
Yeah.
Okay? I really would appreciate it if a couple times a week you could bring mom dinner and sit with her for a couple of hours so I can go enjoy my kids' soccer games.
Yeah.
You see the difference in how that message gets across? You
start getting empathy on this side, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Wow.
And the other thing that we struggle with sometimes as caregivers is we make assumptions that that other person knows or understands
exactly
what kind of burden we're carrying, but we never really share that. We never really tell people.
Yeah.
So instead of, making that accusatory statement where you never help with Dad, you have no idea what I go through, right? Instead of that, it might be, Christine, let's have a cup of coffee. I just want to share with you what my day looks like when I'm taking care of Dad.
Yes.
Now that gives you an understanding of what my world looks like.
Yes.
Because all that you accusatory, you don't care kind of stuff, all of that is based on the assumption that you know what I'm going through. You know what my day is like. You know how much I sacrificed. And you are not, obviously you don't care because you're not responding with any assistance or support.
What's funny is that reminds me of something Brene Brown was talking about, is that when we don't know the answer to something, we fill in the gaps and storytell in our head, right? So when we storytell, we create these scenarios, kind of like what you just said. Oh, she's not helping because she doesn't care.
Exactly.
And then you start getting fiery because of these stories you're telling yourself versus saying, hey, why, I feel like I'm doing a lot here. What are you, like, I know you're probably busy. What's going on? How can we make this work? And then you start realizing, oh, maybe she did X, Y, and Z, and I was totally wrong, and now I'm riled up for no reason. Do you think that people go to, and again, when I say people, hi, my husband will attest, I love the you statements. Do you think we do that coming from a place of vulnerability? We're scared that we're failing, that we don't want people to, blame us, that something's going on, that instead of, and it's hard to be real with your feelings. It's hard to say, I'm feeling sad. You're making me feel sad. That's not easy to be vulnerable and do that. Do you think that's why we do that?
Absolutely. As caregivers, once you start walking in that role as a primary caregiver, you've already at that point in time made a commitment to do whatever it takes to be able to meet the needs of this loved one, whether that's a parent, a spouse, an adult child, whatever the situation might be. So once you in your head take on that commitment and the responsibility, we have this little voice in our head that lays out a whole set of expectations of I should be able to do this, I should know this, I should act this way, I shouldn't need help. And so what happens is all of a sudden the reality is this is hard.
Yeah.
And this is burdensome.
Yep.
And it takes so much from an individual person. So when the reality sets in that somehow you're tired, you need a break, you can't do all this by yourself, now we have this little message in our head that goes, oh, you're not a good enough daughter.
Yeah.
You're not a good enough wife. You're inadequate. Right?
Yeah, and then all of a sudden,
that's right.
Your kids need you, and you're not with your
Right.
kids, and you haven't
Right.
made dinner for your family,
Right.
and gosh,
And
it's
so
everything.
it just kind of starts to spiral out of control when we let all those negative messages get in our heads and then drive everything we do. So when we're listening to those voices, we tend to not reach out because somehow we see that as a weakness. Somehow we see that as a fault or some kind of failure on our part as a caregiver. So we never talk to anybody about how we're feeling or what this is taking from us as an individual person until when?
Yeah, we're upset.
We get into a
We're about
crisis.
to blow.
That's right. We're at, the end of our rope.
Yep.
It's like one more little thing
Yep.
is going to put me over the cliff,
Yep.
and then I'm going to start screaming, right? And
Yeah.
I'm going to start yelling at people. And then that's when we get into that whole cycle of you,
Yep.
instead of, just taking a deep breath, trying to identify what it is we're experiencing and understanding that you are one person. I tell people all the time when we're in support groups or I'm doing public speaking, one of the important things is that caregivers start to understand the need to stop beating yourself
Yeah.
up. And we're going
Yeah.
to talk about that some more in detail in a future episode. But, the bottom line is you're one person.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, it takes 30 of us around
Yeah.
the clock to do professionally what you guys are trying to do
Yeah.
with one or two people at home.
Yeah.
It's just not humanly possible to be all things to one person who's walking this journey. It is just such a demanding kind of role. You've got to be able to cut yourself some slack, and you've got to be willing to try to have those difficult discussions with individuals to, try to elicit help. The other thing is sometimes, Christine is my sister and she would love to help me, but she has no clue what I need. And she has no clue how to be helpful. Christine might be sitting at home going, well, I'm not a nurse. I don't know anything about taking care of somebody. I have no idea, how to take care of Dad or how to contribute to the situation. So sometimes it's not that people don't want to help, it's that people don't know what to do. They don't
Yeah.
know how to help you. And if you can't learn to clearly communicate what you need, what Dad needs, to give you support, if those words continue to go unspoken, Christine's just going on about
Yep.
her day-to-day life thinking we don't need anything because we haven't reached out.
Do you kind of think that as soon as you get that diagnosis, family roles need to be established? Because does it feel like the farther you go down, the more that individual gets isolated, and then it's just too late at that point?
And first of all, I would say it's never too late.
Okay.
Okay. But what happens is the farther into this journey you get, the more the burden is, the greater the burden is,
Right.
the more challenge it is, the more emotionally charged it is, the more physically draining, emotionally draining, spiritually draining it becomes. And so once you have that diagnosis, if you can once you get past that initial shock and you get to the point where you're going, okay, this is our new reality, this is where we are now going to have to be walking. One of the things that we'll talk about in one of our next episodes is how do you have that family meeting?
Yeah.
How do you get everybody together and say, oh, okay,
Yeah.
Dad's got dementia, so let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Let's work through what he's going to need, what I'm going to need, who's going to play what role, how are we going to be able to support this. It's going to be important as a family or as a community. Everybody understands that we're in this together.
Yep.
This is not a journey that can be walked alone. Now, the realistic, perspective for some caregivers is they are an only child. There is nobody else. Okay. Or I'm a spouse and I don't have any other family members that are still living or are accessible to me for whatever reason. And so when I tell people we talk about family and support and community, we're not just talking about blood relatives, okay? You can build community through your church, through your neighbors, through your friends, people who have been connected to you your whole life.
Yeah.
So community can be anyone who cares, anyone who is willing to help. You just have to help people know and understand what it is you need. How do you build that community? Yeah. How do you bring people together to rally around this person who's been diagnosed? And what does that look like?
And it's so interesting that you do say there's always personality traits, right, that is just spelling out for me as you're talking. You have that one who type A, take the initiative, I'm gonna give out the assignments, right? And that person normally always wishes that they were not that person, that they could just say la vie, right? But that's just not how they're wired. Right. So you have to know that if you're that person in your family, you may have to give assignments to others because in your family, they're not thinking the way you do.
Right. The other thing that's going to be critical to successfully develop that community and get people on board is to help people be part of the process. Don't just call Christine your sister and say, hey, Christine, your job is going to be, cooking mom dinner every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday.
But that's the most effective way. That's my love language.
Okay.
Short to the point. Got it?
So part of it is about, bringing those people together who are in your community, whoever that might be, and bringing everybody to the table and say, okay, these are the concerns. These are the issues. These are the needs, whatever, language you're going to use when you're asking for support and trying to manage and navigate through this. Put all on the table, and then when everybody comes to the table, you say, so Christine, what piece of this do you feel like you could give time to, or you could contribute? What's your, and doing that, you're going to get a much better buy-in from people. Now, if you got somebody who goes, I can't do any of it. I'm just too busy. I got too many kids, things going on. I got, I got to take care of my husband. I got this,
Okay.
So now it's going to be a matter of everybody else in that community picking up the pieces, because the reality is there are going to be some people like that.
Yeah.
And the problem is oftentimes people don't understand that caregiving can be a lot of different things. You say, I need you to help take care of dad. Oh my gosh, that means I'm going to have to strip dad down and give him a shower, and I can't do that. There's no way I can do.
Yeah.
Some people are just not wired to be that kind of a caregiver. So what you need to do is sit down and talk to Christine, think about who Christine is as a person.
Yeah.
And what could Christine come and do? Maybe Christine is the person who will come and sit with dad and play checkers with him for 2 or 3 hours and just laugh and have fun. Why? I get to take a break, go get my hair done, go shopping for a minute, go out for lunch with some friends, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the piece. So caregiving is so much more than just physically caring for a person 24/7, right? There's all different kinds of ways people can contribute. But sometimes we get locked into this mindset as a caregiver that it has to be all or nothing. And so if people aren't willing to give everything, then we make this assumption, okay,
That's
well,
it.
obviously they're going to be out of the picture, and
Yes.
they don't care. They're not going to
Yes.
be.
Yes.
And that's not what it's about at all.
Yes, and I think, remembering the focus. What's the focus here? The focus is we love this person so much.
That's it.
And we got to figure this out.
That's exactly right. And that's how you need to start that conversation.
Yeah.
Is, we're all Dad's kids.
And boy, does this stink, right?
Yes,
Boy, is this going to be a burden on all of us.
This is a sucky journey
Yes, no one asked for this. No one wants it.
That's absolutely right. But, it all comes down to the perspective of understanding everybody, embracing the reality that caregiving of any kind is a very deep, time-consuming, self-sacrificing kind of burden. That's the reality, all right? Look around the room at all the people that are loved ones of this person walking this journey.
Yep.
Okay, do any of them want anybody around this table to have to deal with that? No,
Nope.
Of course not. None of us would have chosen that.
Nope.
So knowing that, now you have to ask yourself, what is it I can contribute
Yep.
to share the burden, to help take care of this person who sacrificed everything for me when I was growing up? Asking for help that first time is the most difficult thing that you're going to do. Once you get past that first initial ask for help, it gets easier as you go.
Don't you also feel like sometimes people get overwhelmed when you ask them? And so I'm almost in my head thinking, would a good solution to someone, that family member who's like, I can't, I have so much. Okay, well, when you can, if you find time, if something gets a little less, let me know.
Yeah.
Keeping that door open, knowing that, at least sometimes I'm like that too. If I'm feeling like my cup is full and then someone asks me for something and then I just am starting to get a little overwhelmed.
Right.
And then you realize, oh, I can fit that in.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to slam doors. You don't
Yeah.
want to just cut ties with people who are important to the person that's living this reality. And understand that, people are gifted differently. They are wired differently. And some people will be really good at this, and some people will falter the entire time.
Yep.
But let people contribute at whatever level they can.
Yeah.
Maybe all you can do is say, you know what, I'll come sit with Dad and we'll watch his favorite Western, John Wayne Western, and pop some popcorn and we'll have that, and I can do that for 2 hours out of my week.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the most you can
Yeah.
give. Okay, let's take it. Whatever it looks like. Maybe it's that, your husband will come and mow the lawn for Mom every Saturday, so
Yeah.
she doesn't have to worry about hiring somebody or trying to get out there by herself and do it.
Yep.
So it's about learning to accept at whatever level people are willing to give or contribute to help share the burden. You have to be realistic in your expectations. Not everybody can be 100% totally jump in with both feet kind of committed.
Yes. That's probably the best thing a therapist said to me is manage your expectations.
Yep.
And then you won't, fall as hard.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, have the conversation. Use your I words.
Yep. I statements.
And we're not gonna be perfect.
No.
There's no pass or fail.
That's
We just
absolutely
are gonna
true.
try.
And one of the things we're going to spend some time on in one of the future episodes is we're going to talk about how to take your mistakes and make opportunities out of those. We are all human beings. We all are going to make mistakes. There's no handbook on how to do this journey or how to be the best caregiver in the world. It just isn't that way. So you got to give yourself some grace. God gives us grace and mercy, thank goodness. You got to learn to give yourself some grace and give other people grace on this journey, because we are just human beings. There's no handbook or instruction manual for this. And so we all are just trying to do the best we can, just like your loved one is trying to do the best they can with what they've got left. and so it really is embracing that and understanding that, and how do we all work together to give this person the very best quality of life on this journey as they can, as well as understanding how do we help support and take care of whoever their primary caregiver is, and not just sit back and watch that person crash and burn.
Support for the Living Wisdom podcast is provided by InTouch Pharmaceuticals, a long-term care pharmacy committed to meeting the specialized pharmaceutical needs of their clients. Visit intouchpharma.com.